Hello and welcome back to another video from TrainingRite.com. In this video, I'm going to quickly walk you through as how we can go ahead and build a Jenkins pipeline. And in that pipeline, we will be running some Cucumber and Gherkin acceptance tests. All right, to get started, here is a basic overview. I have added to the GitHub a bunch of projects, and I'm going to be walking you through very briefly, taking you into this repository. So I can share the repository with you, and then you could fork it or download it to play with it. So it's a simple project wherein I have in my source test, if you could see, I have basically a feature. And in the feature file, what I basically have here is a login feature wherein I am saying that given a user is on a web page, when the user clicks on a sign-in link and enters a certain username and password and clicks on the sign-in button, then the user should be seeing a welcome back message. So pretty straightforward, and the data would be coming from these examples, and we can keep it for the test purpose. We can keep it, pretty simple, like 1 or 2 iterations it can do. All right, so that's your login feature, and as far as the step definition is concerned, you would be able to find it over here. I have in the step definitions, I basically implemented that particular feature. So it's a login feature that I have implemented by having a step definition. So for each step, rather than putting any code like a Selenium WebDriver to open the browser and to do certain things, actually clicking on the link and clicking on the buttons or putting in anything into the username and the whatnot. So I basically I'm substituting that with a sysout just so that we can prove the point and keep it simple. Now you could pretty much replace this with your Selenium WebDriver code, and that should work like a charm. Okay, now that you know the project, let's see as how we will be going and building a pipeline. So I've started my Jenkins using a WAR file, and right now we are on port number 1990. All right, so I'm going to start off with the new task or a new project, and we will call it as a acceptance testing build pipeline. All right, so we will, as the name goes, we want to keep it not as a freestyle project, but more mostly like a pipeline project, so that you could see as how to actually build a pipeline. So by selecting this as the template and hitting OK, we're going to be brought into something that you have already seen in the past. So here you have slightly different tabs compared to what we have been seeing all along. So these tabs are normally the build triggers and the pipeline. That's what we will be using. So as a part of the general tab, you just describe your project. So I'm just going to basically copy paste here and say that this is a demo of the pipeline. All right, something of that sort. Now, I don't want to select it as any type of project. Usually in a freestyle, you would like to call it as a GitHub project and give the details of the repository as where it is, and and then you could in your build trigger poll that and kick in the build, based on if any change happened to that build or any update had happened to it. So we usually would mention it over here. In our case, I would rather do it in a pipeline. So I'm not going to select any from here. And we would go into the build trigger portion of it. And in the build trigger portion, I can basically decide how I would interact with my repository. So the way I would like to do it is let's poll our repository, and the way we're going to be polling is let's say every 5 minutes. So I'm gonna hourly every 5th minute, and the rest are asterisks. So we'll have 4 asterisks. All right. So if you need to know as how to set it up, of course you already know. You could just go in here and then take a look, and this can guide you a little bit more as how you can do this. But if I put it back, you can see now that it's a Sunday, February 18th. At the time of this recording, it's 1:26, and the next run would be at 5 minutes after this. And this, once I apply and save, you would see these things changing in here. Okay, so right now, since I've not applied, once I apply and save it, that 5 minutes timer is going to kick in at that time. Now, the next thing is we coming up with the pipeline, right? So if you have not done any pipeline in the past, then you know that to build a pipeline, we got these options in here. You could do a pipeline script right here, or you could have a pipeline script coming from a Jenkins file, which you could put it in your Git repository. So for the first one, I want to keep it simple. So I would select this pipeline script, and here I would go about creating that script. Now, there are a bunch of ways we could do that. I can drop down here, and I could just go and start off with the Hello World template, just so that you can see that it would spit out for me a node and the structure of how I should be writing my code. Just out of curiosity, if I do it, as you can see here, this would put a node, and inside it, I would be basically typing whatever I need to type. So as you know, in a pipeline, there are certain things that we need to be concerned about. That's basically your stages, right? And at every stage, what steps do you want to execute at that stage? So one of the steps could be just be echoing, whatever you need to echo. Or in real life, you would not just echo something; you would rather basically go and do something. So that's what we are going to be typing in here. So if I had not selected this hello world, then I should do all that by myself. So let me just do this by coming in here and typing node and a curly brace open, and somewhere the curly brace is getting closed. Okay, in between, I have this. Whenever the pipeline is going to execute, we could have one or multiple nodes, and these nodes are trying to understand that as nothing but a way to execute, your actions or your steps. So, and this can basically be getting executed either on your main master machine, or you could even, deploy it onto your slave machines. So for now, to keep it simple as the very elementary, video of pipelines, I will basically keep it simple, and we run it over, right here rather than running it on the slave nodes. But is it possible for you to run it on the slave nodes? Absolutely. And that's what we'll be seeing in the subsequent videos. For now, we will just go in and then see what we can be putting in here. So here, I could basically have some stages. So I could just go ahead and say stage, and this could be like, it could be like let's say like a checkout stage. So in this checkout stage, what do you intend to do? Basically, in this checkout stage, I would intend to check out my code from my repository, which is in Git. So either you could type all this, or you could take some help from this pipeline syntax. So if I would like to, if you're experienced enough to know those commands and type it, good for you. But if you are in the learning stages, you could just come in and click on this pipeline syntax, and let me show you as how we could be picking up something from the drop down, and that is going to populate the code over here. So if I select that, it's going to bring me to a pipeline syntax page, wherein we have a snippet generator. So based on what steps we would like to implement in our node, by selecting that and say generate the pipeline script, it is going to do that for us. So let's take a look. So right here, we have a huge number of steps that we could basically seek some help from this snippet generator. So right now, I am looking for some help on Git. So I could go in here, Git, and I would say that, hey, I need to generate some pipeline script so that I could check out the code from a Git repository. And so I got to provide the address of the repository. And the address of the repository is right here. Let's see. I am logged into this. So this is github.com, sdet selenium trainer, right? sdet selenium trainer 0721 cucumber. So I'm going to take all of this, right? That's my basically my repository. And I am going to come in here and I am going to paste that here. Now, that's the repository. And are we going to any other branch other than master? Then you would have it. Right now, we are having everything on the master. So that's what I will go ahead with. Do I need to supply any credentials? Since the repository is not private, it is a public repository so that you all can have access to it. So there is not a need for me to provide any credentials in here. So for me to check out the code, I would basically need to know as how to write that Groovy code or the Groovy script, and this is going to help me. So it's pretty much, you know, a simple command like git and then the path of that. So I'm going to copy this, Control C, and if I come back to my here in my node, so as a part of my step under the stage of checkout, that's my step, right? So basically, when I am going to run this build pipeline, it is going to check out the code, and after it checks out the code, I would like to run some test, those cucumber tests. So to do that, I will have like another stage. I mean, you don't really have to have a stage for it. You can put everything under a single stage. So I could call it like a checkout and run acceptance test. So rather than doing that, just to make it like a you know, look a little nicer, I would say like stage run acceptance test, right? In our case, I have the single test. Otherwise, you could have like run acceptance test, run and just to be more precise, run cucumber test or whatever you would like to, right? Okay, so run cucumber test. And how am I gonna do that? So since I said the stage is a checkout and this is the command to do that, so to run the test, I could be using Maven for that, but what command or how can I come up with that Groovy script for it, right? Because the pipeline understands the Groovy script. So again, I'm going to go into the pipeline syntax, and over here in the snippet generator, I am going to look for, if you're on a Mac machine or a Linux machine, you have to run some shell scripts. Here, you will be running some sort of like a batch. So it's a Windows batch because I'm on the Windows. So you could be running that. So you could say, I want to run Maven Clean and either a package or a test, you know, anything would work. So if you go in here, that's the Groovy script that it is going to create. I'm going to do a Control C to copy it, come over here and make it as that. All right. Okay. Very nice. Now, what else do you like to do other than that? I mean, at every point, I could have said echo this, echo that, right? So that's more of like telling me that that's what is happening. So I could say echo code checking out from Git repository, right? And likewise, I could do echo here, echo, and I could do executing acceptance tests, right? I mean, like as an example, if you know what test, you could say in our case, just a login test, right? So that's that. And now we could also get into, do you really want to notify, if something happens, do you want to notify people about it? So you could have some code to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to come back, make sure that this runs first, and then we'll come back and then we'll put the notify part of it. So if I say apply and save, all right. Now I am sure if I go back and wait for that 5 minutes to kick in, it is going to do that because that's what we had configured. So if we come back in here and if we look into this, we configured it to run at 1:36:59. So that's a pass. So it should do, or else I could just build it myself. If I'm building it myself, it is looking for, and there you go, right here. I'm getting some notifications as what is happening. And if I really want to see what is going on right now, because this is I could go into my, I could go and the test did ran. And if I look into my console output, I could see that here is my stages. So using the stage step without a block argument is deprecated. So here, so we said entering the run cucumber test. And in the run cucumber test, we have done whatever we have done. So let's take a look what is happening in here. So these are the tests that we ran. So code for executing, user clicks on the sign in link, user enters username password, your password will come here, sign up will come here. That is coming from here. So if I go back and look into my code in the step definitions right here, it's coming from here. So if you see, user is on the SDET training homepage. Code for executing this functionality will come here. So that's what it should have said, right? And code for executing user clicks on will come here. So that's what it should have said. So if I go back and take a look, let me just close this snippet so that there's no confusion. And if I look into it, that's what. So user is on the SDET homepage. Code for executing this functionality will come here. Now, just for the heck of it, if I go back in here and say here, I need to change that, right? So I will edit it right here, right? Rather than doing it on my Eclipse and doing committing and all that, I can quickly come in here. So just for the heck of it, I'm just gonna put just so that it doesn't make much of a sense in here in the context of what we are doing, but I guess to see that everything is kicking in right. So I made a commit to it, right? And if we would have waited like for 5 minutes, that anyhow would kick in. If we wait for 5 minutes, that would kick in and do a build again. But in my case, right now I'll just do it build now, or just to make it not wait for 5 minutes, I could come back in here and just put an asterisk there. So that way it is going to kick in every minute. So I apply and save, and I will not run it. I'm just gonna sit back and wait for like a minute to see if it is going to kick in at 1:41. So while it is waiting on that 1 minute to expire so that it can poll and see that if there was any change from the last time, it can go ahead and then it can compile if it sees any change. So while we're waiting on it, we can look into the full stage view here. So this full stage view will give you these stages. So this is a checkout stage, and this run cucumber test So if we come up with one more stage, that is going to come up here. So this is your build pipeline, right? So it's a stage view. So it can show you any number of things. And over here, if you want to see specifically what happened in that, so see now the second thing kicked in, right? It is pending, looking for it, and now it is running in. And once it runs and finishes it, I will go back. Once it finishes, it's still running. So we can go back and see if we just put in my name in there, right? So let's see if it pops up. So if I go into the console output, and if we look into here, there you go. So that thing came up, and so 4 steps. So the test pass. So we have like a 1 scenario, 6 steps, and you know, everything did ran. So, and we made some change, and the change did run. So right now it's 142. So we set it for every minute. So every minute things are it is trying to poll and see if there is any change. If there is any change, it is going to run and show us, and all the changes that are done you can see in here, right? If there is any change, that change would show up, where the change happened, what time did the change happen. So all that would come in here. Down the road, we could also be looking into some beautiful reports that we could actually be creating. And those reports, you know, either a JUnit reports or our own custom reports can give us any information that we want. So rather than depending on Jenkins to do that, we basically could be creating something like that. So anyways, coming back in here, this is the full stage, keeping the history of it. So we did it at 1337. We did it at 1341. There was a commit that made that thing to happen. And if you look into the detail page, in the detail page, it basically tells you where exactly that commit was, right? So if you had like so more than one, right? We only have a login step definition. So if you had like login, and if you have like forgot password, so multiple functionalities you are testing. And if there was any basically change that triggered a new build, you know, you would see the summary of all that over here. All right. And in the pipeline steps, it basically tells you how the flow is going. And then if you really need to see at every stage what is happening, it'll show you by taking you in here and giving you the console output. It'll show you that. This green I have used in your case, unless and until you're using a plugin. So I used a plugin to show the different balls, and that's why it is showing green balls for me. For you, it will be probably be showing like blue balls, right? I mean, if you care, there is in the manage. Let me just take you back into Jenkins, and in manage Jenkins, if you go in there and if you look for the plugins, manage plugins, you should be seeing a plugin for the balls. By the way, I'm under the impression that you guys already have taken care of these things, the pipeline API, right? So pipeline API, I mean, not the pipeline API, but the build pipeline build and all that should be there, right? So that comes as a part of that. Now let's look for that balls.
I couldn't find any linked video skills that can find that.
I am so scared of this Alexa because she, for some odd reason, she wakes up and then she talks to me in the middle of mine of your night. But anyway, so it's somewhere there. I'll highlight it and point it out later as where I might have done that. So coming back, let's go into this acceptance and configure and go into the pipeline and do something more in here. And what is that something more that we are doing? Let me add a stage here. And in this stage, I will call it as a notification stage. So in this notification stage, I am right now saying echo shoot emails when job completed, right? If I could spell completed. Okay, so shoot emails when job completed. Okay, so to shoot that email when the job completes, you have to have some function that you need to call. So that's your step, right? So we could write a function in Groovy, so that will be written out of that node. So let me very quickly write a function. This you could pretty much find somewhere on the internet if you Google, or you could also get some help from your pipeline syntax to do that. So I'm just quickly gonna show you how to do that. So here is a function. So in Groovy, I mean, we do a lot of courses with TrainingRite.com. We do a lot of courses wherein we have, as an example, let me just take you here. Forgive me. So here in the SOAP UI, we have a lot of Groovy scripting that we do. See here, Groovy. So because in SOAP UI, you have to write a lot of code in Groovy. So but here in your pipeline, the code that we could use here is Groovy. So while we are in this course, we teach you as how to write functions in Groovy, how to declare variables, how to do parameterization of data from Excel, fetching data from Excel, and all that good stuff. But anyway, so we are not going to go into too many details. So I copied this code, which I'm going to type from my SOAP UI course. So I'm quickly going to show you what it is. So a def is a way of mentioning that I am creating either a variable or a function. So this is a notify email, notify by email, let's say, right? And you could notify by SMS, you could notify by email, whatnot. So this notify by email, let's say, takes an argument, and the argument is some message that we want to pass to it. So how do you actually send the email and stuff like that? So for that, I will write right in here, I will use something called email ext, and in here I will hang on for a second. I will go ahead and I will use some environment variables. So just to give you a little idea, if you go into this pipeline syntax and if you look into global variable reference and all that, so here it tells you what are all the different variables, environment variables that we can use. So if you, as an example, if you see there is something called a job name. There is something called a job name. And then there is something called build number, right? So job name of the project of this build, right? So in our case, name of the project of this build, something like we call it acceptance testing, something like that. A build number. So we ran build number 1, build number 2. So those are the build numbers. Like that, we could have like build number, a job name, anything from here. The environment variables, I would be picking it up and I would be using it in my code in here in the Groovy code. So right now we are going to email. So to email, you would have a to, right? And the to part of the email is the email addresses. You could have multiple email addresses separated with a semicolon. So in this case, let's say I want to send it to I don't know, maybe SDET trainer at outlook.com. And one more, sdet.trainer, sdet dot or sdet training at gmail.com, and one more, TrainingRite at gmail.com. Right? Okay, so you got a bunch of emails you would be sending this email to. And it's up to you if you want to. If you're coming from a Java background, you might want to do like a semicolon at the end of it. Otherwise, you could just leave it like that. And what is the subject of my email? Because this email is going to go to whoever it is, right? So I will, in the subject, I would pass probably this message I would pass as the subject, right? So to pass the message as the subject, I could be using a $sign, right? But subject itself is a string, and so in here I would be passing, let's say this message, right? So subject would be that message that we are passing. So build pass, build fail, whatever that is, right? And excuse me, sometimes the subject should also include the job number or the job name. So I would call it job name, and in the job name we would have, let's say, that environment job underscore name, right? So I would use a single quote dollar in env dot job underscore name, right? And this closes and single quote comes in here. Okay, so that's the subject, and then the body of it, I would put something in the body, so let's say in the body we would just say in the body job started at, right, and like we could give the job, what time the job started and whatnot. So right now I just want to do something like this, and let's see. So that's something that we created here, right? So we want to call this, hang on for a second, we want to call this notify, this I want to call this from the main one. So from here I want to call this and want to pass the message, like Jenkins, right, coming from this notification coming from Jenkins build pipeline, something like that, right? Auto build pipeline, something like that. Okay, so we have started. I apply, I save. Just to make sure that everything is good, I will manually build it because I already see that there is a problem here, right? So if we go there and if we look into what my problem is, there's some problem with something missing, right? So expecting this subject, something like that, right? So few things that are not right. So what I am going to do is I am going to basically copy that code. So if you allow me here for a second, I did this as a pipeline here. So let me just take that code that I did So here, so I'm going to take this, right, and come back because I don't know what did I type incorrectly. So I'm just gonna go and replace this code, and I can give you guys that code. So that will be that code, right? So notify by email, right? So notify by email, and I have something in here. So let me just take some of the emails out here, right? So all right, so apply, save, and I will run that job right now just to see. So we come in here, acceptance test. So this is the job that we are running. The third time it failed. So if I run that, so it is running. It's not completed yet. It's running. Okay, so it did complete, and it completed with a success. Now I got to see if I got an email. So the email address that we used was TrainingRite. So if I go to gmail.com, and and there it is. So if you see here, then this notification coming from Auto Jenkins pipeline, started job, complete job, and it also gave me a link to test it. And when I click on that, I come back, and then I can check like build 4 of that. When did it ran? We ran at 157 and all that, so it shows. And if there was a change, the change would have shown. In this case, it did not trigger. The code did not get triggered because of any change. So if you want to make sure that the code gets triggered because of any change, I could literally go back to here and make a change here. So if I want to make a change here and see if that automatically is going to trigger a build from Jenkins and send notification or whatnot, right? So we will see. So before I make this change, let me just go back and do something in here. Make it configure here when I'm calling it in the pipeline. When I'm calling it, I was passing this notification is coming from this. So I'm not gonna say that. I will just say Jenkins pipeline. So that's what we are passing. Notify by email Jenkins pipeline, and a couple of dots, and then so that comes over here, and it is sending an email, and but in the subject it is saying job and job name, right? So the job name, whatever is the name of the job, would show up. And what else are we saying? Build number. So build number, so far I did 4 builds, right? So the build number 5, build number 6, build number 7. So that will show up. And then in the body, I said started job name, build number. And then to check the console output, I put a link here. So the link is build URL and job name and the build number. So if you anytime if you look at it, if you see here the link, if I go into Jenkins and click on a link that is available, that link is basically your build URL, job name, and build number. And where did we get all this? We got this from over here. If you go into the global variables and if you start looking into it, so there are a lot of other things that can show. So we can also send some images, right? We can send images, and we can send a lot of information is there. So all that things we should be able to see from here, what we can do, what we can. So all that information is in here. So that is in the pipeline. So let me just save, come back, and this time four had already been, 4 builds have already been done, right? But this time I will trigger that build automatically by making a change to the code. So if I go back in here and if I click here to make the change, what change do we want to do? So let's say here, user should see welcome back message. So I will say system. So I'm just going to take this. Copy. So I'm saying that all good, we see welcome message. So let's say Selenium get text, Selenium WebDriver get text would have verified that we see the welcome back message. So we see the welcome back message. So right now we are not using that you should use, but right now I'm just I'm making this change in my code, right? And then I'm committing it. So commit here, I would say that user, say the commit part is right, and here I would say this is the change that I did, right? So okay, so that's the commit part that we are saying that's the change that we did. Okay, we did the change. Now let's come back and wait for at least 1 minute for the polling to trigger, and then once it triggers, see that the third stage is shown up. So in your build stage view, we have the checkout, running the cucumber test, notification, and down the road, if you add more stages, they will all show up, and it starts to look much more professional and whatnot. So either we wait for a minute for this to trigger, and the build will start automatically. There it is. It started, and we'll be waiting for it to tell us what's going on. And if everything is good, here it is running the checkout right now. And then after that, it is doing this, and then it will do that. So when everything is said and done, this should stop, and I should not only see what triggered it. So the change, here is the change that triggered it, right? At 141, or rather at 203, we made that change. So that triggered it. I should have received the email notification. So if I go in here and do a refresh, here is my Jenkins build pipeline. So that's that notification that I got, and this is for the fifth one, build fifth started. So when it did, we got that. So bottom line of this is you can see, if you know what you're doing, you not only have a history of in your build pipeline for all the stages and all the builds that are getting triggered, but you could also see which one had triggered what, and all those good things will be shown up. So Git polling log, this tells you where we are polling it from, what's happening, and all that. And if you go up here in the changes that I already talked to you about, full stage view we already talked to you about, and here is basically all your builds that are popping up. So very simple that we did. Let me just walk you through one more time. We started off by saying that, okay, we have our repository sitting here in the GitHub, and we had some basic tests that were in there. So if you look into my test in my Cucumber, in my feature, I had one feature, and that's what I did, right? And to implement this, we had some steps, and the steps are in here. So here are my steps that you are seeing for each of the Gherkin in the feature. We are implementing these with these functions. So what you should do, again, I'm repeating myself, is replace it with the actual Selenium WebDriver, or you could also use headless if you want to take that route. So that's that. Then once we have it, we came in here, created this new project, and the project type is a pipeline type. In the pipeline type, we gave the name and the description, and then we went into the build triggers. I showed you different ways of polling it, and the polling basically is to, you don't want to go like every minute because that will be putting a lot of stress on unnecessary on your not just on your Jenkins but also on your repository to find out if there is anything. So rather than pulling it, it should be a push. So push part is if you establish the hooks between your GitHub and Jenkins. So rather than Jenkins polling it, GitHub can push the notification, and whenever there is any change there, rather than we go in and then asking it, GitHub will tell us, us meaning Jenkins, and once Jenkins gets the notification that yes, there is a change from the GitHub with a push with the hooks that we would establish, and then it is going to run this pipeline script. And in the pipeline script, we had these stages. So I came with checkout, and I came with the run cucumber test, and so in between, just for the heck of it, I could have done this. We would have some before the run integration tests, right? And running integration tests using Selenium, Grid, and WebDriver, something like that. All right. Okay. So there's no actual implementation of it, just the echo, just to show it to you that you could do things like that. So in your node, you will establish your stages, and in your stages, you would have the actual steps that will execute. Those are the commands that will execute. And to get this, if you need some help, you could go in the Groovy step generator, and then once you have that, you could even call any functions. Like in this case, I just gave you an example of sending an email. It could be anything. You could send an SMS. You could send. You could literally call. I mean, these days you have different applications like Zapier and many other that is not coming into my head right now. But you could do things like that. So apply, save, and if we are waiting for a minute, since there is no change to the build or to the code, nothing was committed, so no new pipeline is going to get triggered unless and until I build it myself. So if I build it myself, you would see that there's a checkout, and between the checkout and the cucumber test, there will be an integration test. So let's see how it works. So here it goes. It is looking for there it is. So it is looking for the free. Now, hang on for a second. There it is, the notification. So I was worried, like, what happened to the fourth one? Okay, so so we got that. If just for the heck of it, if you go into the full stage view now, because there is a new step, all those previous ones, right? They from this reporting, they will disappear. So there's an option that you could use to save all those. We'll talk about that sometime in the other video. This is getting too big. My intention was to keep it like 10-15 minutes. So all right, so that's a good introduction to how you could be building a Jenkins pipeline. So I've shown you how we will be talking from Jenkins to a Git repository using a build pipeline and executing it. Any new commits would automatically trigger a new build, and the Jenkins pipeline would get executed, or you could manually do it by coming in and then clicking on the build. All right, so that's about it for this video, and we'll come back and talk a little bit more in the future videos. Thank you.